That's such a dark thing to say.
I mean, Thanos snapped half of existence.
That's right.
And we're just talking about 2%.
Exactly.
The Leftovers is a TV series created by Damon Lindelof that ran on HBO from 2014 to 2017. After 2% of the world's population suddenly disappears one day, the remaining 98% of the world has to reckon with what it might mean.
The series is based on a novel by Tom Perrotta, who specializes in existential questions that transpire in suburbia. And Damon Lindelof, we know from mystery box series like Lost. He reads a Stephen King review of Tom Perrotta's Leftovers novel that sparked his interest. He seeks Tom Perrotta out for collaboration, and they adapt the first season to the book. And then they depart in seasons 2 and 3 with Tom Perrotta in the writer's room. So we start by focusing on Justin Theroux as Kevin Garvey Jr., the cop in small town America. After the disappearance, his wife Lori goes to join the Guilty Remnant cult. They take a vow of silence. They dress in all white. They chain smoke to accelerate their deaths. Meanwhile, strange things are beginning to happen in town.
Kevin is seeing a person that presumably, well, we're wondering whether or not the person is actually there. He only appears when Kevin's alone, and no one can seem to find this person that Kevin claims he sees. And also, Kevin is making himself a bagel in the break room, and the bagel disappears.
Yes. Right. And so Kevin, throughout the course of season 1, develops a relationship with Nora.
Nora is a beating heart of the series. Her husband and 2 children all disappear on October 14th. And so you have this moment where she's in the kitchen with all 3 of her family members, and then suddenly there's silence and they are gone.
In season 2, they move to Jordan, right? Jordan, Texas. But it's the only known place on Earth where nobody disappeared during the sudden departure. And you get a much more supernatural undertone. Kevin, at one point, appears to die on screen and visit the underworld. Season 3 then gets even more apocalyptic. So let's start with the structure.
Structure.
Maybe we didn't want to talk about structure today.
No,
We
it's
can go a different
great.
route.
The structure was a bit jarring for me. They found this nugget of if they focused on one character in an episode, they could create this gorgeous piece of art. And they found this in season 1 with an episode that focused on Matt, aka Christopher Eccleston, and they carry this throughout the show. Every season has another 2 character-focused episodes. So you kind of stop this big story where you're following everybody and you just hone in on this one character. I love character studies, but it meanders.
The writers do a pretty good job at not structuring a path too narrowly for any of their characters. So those Matt-focused episodes were the hardest for me.
Can you talk about your relationship with the character of Matt? I want to dig. I know we're talking about structure and tone, but I want to dig in on Matt.
Matt is interesting because at no point did I want him on screen. He is an egoist. I think the first time we really get a deep dive into his character, they home in on the strained sibling relationship between him and Nora. And it is clear that he is an empathetic person, but that empathy gets lost in layers of doctrine and dogma that he does not allow for him to meet Nora where she is. Then it becomes clear that he is caring for his functionally comatose wife, who is played by Janelle Maloney. Mary does eventually wake up from her coma, and that seems to be a near resolution of his character's arc, but she eventually leaves him because there seems to be a grandiosity to his life that doesn't allow for him to be present. He still latches on to larger-than-life figures like Kevin Jr., who rises from the dead a few times, which resembles his relationship to Christianity. He starts writing a new gospel for this character. And again, never quite seems to be able to reconcile his belief and his ego and his grief.
Yeah, so the last time we see Matt Jameson is in Australia. And makes a decision to spend time with Nora in her last moments on this earth, presumably. He and Nora have this beautiful conversation by the ocean, talking about their childhood and their relationship. And he very compassionately is with her as she's about to enter this journey that she's about to take. We hear from Kevin in the finale that Matt, went back to Jarden. He got cancer treatment, but he passed away, and he had this grand funeral where many, many people attended. But we don't see that. We're just told that in dialogue.
That's helpful.
Mm.
What I have read is that the showrunners decided to treat him like Job.
Mm.
That is that he is meant to befall many follies and in some ways be rewarded for that faith and others be absolutely punished for it. What ended up working for me as someone who spent a lot of time in evangelical traditions was his religious pass through. He grasps for certainty in faith in a way that I have seen many, many times within the Christian faith. He attaches specific dates to significant events. 7 years after the disappearance, something notable is going to happen. It's going to happen in Australia. And that becomes the thing he latches onto. And he can't help himself but adding another item of certainty to look forward to and latch onto. It is a fair mirror to my experience within evangelical Christianity. I think Lindelof mentions every generation in recorded history is arrogant enough to believe that theirs is going to be the last, that the end of the world is nigh. For some reason, we all want to be the ones to experience the apocalypse.
For what reason, I'm not sure.
I don't know. But it is clear that Matt wants to be part of something special and almost be worthy of it in some ways. So even though I struggled most with him, and even though I don't know that his particular brand of Christianity is entirely familiar to me, some of the ways in which he contorts himself to be attached to structure and dogma, that tracked for me. That religious pass through as a means of avoiding grief and fear of meaninglessness definitely tracked for me. What was your reaction to
Well, much
Matt?
like you, my reaction to Matt was probably the most stark of any character in the show. He he haunts me. And the reason he haunts me is because he is simultaneously the most compassionate character on the show. He sees people other people don't see. He sees their hurt. He sees their pain. He reaches out to them in a way that most people would not. He fights for people who are experiencing this pain. And that is where I struggle with Matt. He has this very rigid, as you mentioned, interpretation of faith based on his reading of the Christian Bible. And when you get to season 3, and he's on a boat from New Zealand to Australia, Matt encounters so many things that are contrary to his view of the world. And yet he believes he sees a man being pushed overboard, and he becomes singularly focused on saving this one man that's been left behind, and will do anything to alert anyone who will listen that this man has been pushed overboard. So you have this dogged pursuit that you see in all of his episodes. The first season, his episode is trying to save his church, the building of his church. Season 2, he's trying to get Mary, his wife, back into Jarden. Season 3, he's trying to alert people that this man was pushed overboard. In every season, he latches onto this one thing that he thinks is most important. When he is doggedly pursuing something that he thinks God wants him to do, he throws the entire thing out. And that is where you see human nature, most of us, set up a rule of what is correct, what should be done. But then when that is challenged, how quickly we throw that away. So Matt is mirroring back to us our inconsistencies in our faith and the way we live our lives.
I would argue that the show does not let anyone off the hook, though, right? So you could read the character of Matt and think, oh, this show has either Christianity or spirituality in its crosshairs, and here is how religious people misbehave when confronted with grief or uncertainty. But his almost his counterweight and his foil in season 2, John, who later gets married to Kevin Garveys Jr.'s ex-wife, Lori, he represents the counter end of that spectrum. He is this loving father with has this beautiful relationship with his family, but he is a hyper rationalist who has no interest in religious dogma in any way, shape, or form, rejects this notion that Jarden is special, and starts terrorizing people who lean into the spirituality or the specialness of Jarden, because he has the same conviction. He is insistent on absurdism and nihilism. You see this foil as John and Matt go head to head. Spoiler alert, they later become allies in grief, starting to deify Kevin Jr. because he's risen from the dead so many times, as far as they can tell, that they start writing a gospel about him and believing in
Well,
him as a holy
John,
figure.
the hyper rationalist, sees a miracle and can't deny it. So he begins to be aligned with the way Matt sees the world.
Correct. So I point that out just to say, like, the show is all about balance and dynamic tension. Going back to structure for just a second, I think that is the beauty of the show, is everybody seems to have deep insights into the world and like the things that we can't see. And at the same time, that begets some level of like certainty. The minute someone tries to like hold on to that as a fixed truth, it starts to sour and move into something potentially harmful and antisocial, or they turn that inward and start to express some level of suicidality or self-sabotage and destruction, right? Several characters in the show attempt suicide, attempt mass suicide at times.
Well, and I think, like, for me, overall, the reason the show captured my attention was because it has this, what you're getting at, this idea that we can have faith in something unseen, and that is not solid ground for most of us all of the time. And that
Right.
that is something that they want to pick at. And the reason why Matt is probably the hardest character for me is because my Christian faith is central to who I am, and Matt pokes at inconsistencies that probably could be seen in my own life. But watching him trying to work out his faith in a faith that I call my own, I don't recognize it as much in him as I hope it can be seen in me. But in a lot of ways, he has these acts of compassion that I don't see myself doing. So, who's living it correctly? I don't know.
Is there, so beyond Matt, is there a character you resonated with most strongly?
Good question. I mean, I really love Lori's story, actually. I know that is an interesting choice, perhaps, but
Oh no, I'm the same. Yeah. I
I
think
know why
Lori,
you love her, but
well, yeah, you probably do. So Lori in the book makes a different choice. So Lori in the show ends up leaving the Guilty Remnant cult. She tries to generate her own pseudo version of a religious movement that she doesn't necessarily believe in, but views it as maybe a second step to trying to get people to off ramp from cultish ideology, and that has disastrous results because it sets up false expectations for what someone can expect on the other side of that. And so we see people returning to their homes and families unprepared to deal with the grief that drove them to the Guilty Remnant in the first place. As she struggles to find her own sense of like purpose and ego in that, reaches her own point of near self-oblivion, And ultimately, her finale is not particularly grand. She learns how to be present for the people in her life who she deems to be somewhat crazy, but worth having a relationship with, and supports them throughout that, whatever that may look like. And that's it. Like there's nothing
Yeah, and I
grand
think
to it.
probably the reason that I assumed that you loved her is because she is a therapist. She thinks that we can apply rational thought and knowledge of ourselves to any situation and come out the other side better, changed, healthier. And
Yeah.
so I assumed you would love her.
Yeah, I think it's funny because I actually think she's a bad therapist. So that is probably not the reason I like her. I do think I like her because her arc at least follows this notion of like the only way out of hell is through. And she basically trudges and comes out the other side. It's not that her rationality was necessarily always correct, but at bare minimum, she was able to participate in shared life without causing harm, and that's meaningful if dissatisfying. So that's why that was compelling.
I loved Kevin Garvey Jr. as well. And I do think we need to hit on Justin Theroux's portrayal of this man.
Yes.
This is like, obviously, he is a central character to the show. He is the top billed actor. I love this idea of Kevin struggling with what like life is supposed to be. Every time he gets what he has been told is what life is supposed to be. He is so discontent and always looking for the exit. We see in season 1, there's a flashback episode of what his family looks like before the sudden departure. And it is the picture of domestic bliss. He is married to this beautiful woman who loves him. He has 2 children. They have the gorgeous house. He has a stable job. He is surrounded by community, surrounded by friends and family, and seemingly living the perfect life. And he can't do anything but think about how to leave or how to get out of it.
Yeah.
And this is a central theme to his character throughout all 3 seasons. Every time he finds stability, he feels suffocated. And sometimes he literally suffocates himself to try and escape this life. It is such an interesting depiction of a man struggling with his masculinity, his view of himself, his cowardice, because he keeps shying away from his responsibilities, what he's supposed to do, and who he's supposed to be. And I just love this through line of Kevin Garvey Jr. constantly pulling against what is expected of him, wanting to be that person, but always falling short.
Yeah. If this show is supposed to be about grief and existential dread after something that feels like an apocalypse, he points out that those seeds were there well before we experienced that collective trauma, right? And the tools that he had to lean on, which were his sense of control in the world as a man following the script that a typical American man is supposed to follow in suburbia. He became a cop. He became a good cop. He
Good cop.
respected. I should
A
say that
respected cop.
he
Yes,
was
yes,
a
yes.
respected cop. He had a family that he could perform the motions very well. And that didn't give him a sense of meaning. That didn't give him a sense of control in life. Equip him for that didn't equip him for connection to other people. And instead of dealing with the pain of that, he would rather just end it all. And there's a cruel reality throughout the series that like he seems to be an immortal human being. He just seems to be unable to die, despite that being the one thing that he kind of wishes he could do. And it's so funny and devastating that when he does visit his version of the underworld, which may be his own mind, unclear, he's an international assassin each time, this cartoonish version of what the typical male is supposed to seek out. And it's this dark irony that by the end of each of those episodes, he ends in these really touching places. He ends up having to rescue a child from being sexually abused by her then husband in the first version of his death. Second version, he functionally has to cut out his own heart. And there's no show that attempts this tone. What did you think of the tone?
I love a dark show that has important questions to ask. I need those existential questions asked, and I need to see an attempted answer at them. And I know logically that no one is going to get at the answer. There is no answer. There is no 2 plus 2 equals 4
Right.
when it comes to the big questions of life. And I just love the idea of a writer's room full of brilliant people who can write dialogue that will shake me to my core, pondering these questions. So the
Yeah.
tone, while it is wildly all over the place, and there are things
Yes.
in the show that are incredibly difficult to reckon with, because it is driving toward these questions, I will forgive most things if we're asking those questions.
Wow, you sound like me talking about Wicked
I
for two.
do.
Wicked for two. Wicked for good.
Blah. Wicked for 2.
uh, did you think? Well, just a quick aside on the tone. Did you find the show funny?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was hilarious. The scene where Kevin and Nora are trying to fly to Australia, and she has global entry and he doesn't, is just the one of the best character beats where instead of waiting in line with him, she does her own thing. It's like, see you on the other side. Like, that was such a fun domestic moment in the middle of an apocalyptic comedy. And the show does that on repeat. We come from very evangelical backgrounds. I am curious how you felt having been on the other side of some key themes that are touched on consistently throughout this show.
One of the things I loved about The Leftovers is Lindelof is not afraid to begin his season with a long sequence that does not include any of our main cast. Season 2 begins with a cave woman essentially experiencing a sudden departure of her own. She's cut off from her community, and things transpire. Season 3 begins with this religious sect in, what was it, like late 19th century?
Yeah.
A religious sect in the late 19th century who believe that the rapture is about to happen at any given time. And they have a leader who uses birds
I think so.
to predict when the world is going to end. And we witness this central 3-person family, mother, father, son, who believe they are doing everything they can to be raptured. And the rapture keeps not happening. And you see the father and son fall away, and you see the mother keep to the faith and be derided for it. And soon she realizes that it doesn't seem like the rapture is going to happen in her lifetime. And it's this sequence that I can't get out of my head. So Christianity has this element of a savior who is coming back, and we don't know the hour and we don't know the means, but we know that Christ has gone to heaven and that he will come back. This is part of the central core of Christian teaching. And as you pointed out, every generation has the audacity to believe that they are the generation where the master is going to come back. So there's this element of Christianity that has us waiting for something. And
Yeah.
this show is really asking the question, what are we waiting for? And if we don't see it, does that change the way we interact with our faith? And it is a difficult thing to reckon with when you are subscribed to a faith that is meant to give you hope.
I know, I think you're right on. And I think that's a helpful encapsulation of at least a version of that reading. So much ambiguity around what that actually looks like, how much is literal versus interpretive. Some people have taken other bits to develop this teaching around something that Christians call the rapture, which is a sudden blink of an eye, people disappear, and then the non-believers are left behind. But I was really into this idea as a kid. Like, this was exciting to me. I get the self-interest involved with wanting to be the last generation. It makes your life feel very dramatic and purposeful. You feel like everything you do matters, and you're part of something bigger than yourself, and that's exciting. Especially from my child brain, I even remember things like when my bedroom faced the street perpendicular to ours. When a car would turn onto our street and I, for some reason, didn't have my shades drawn, my whole wall would light up. And for some reason, if I was like in a mid sleep state, I'd be like, oh my goodness, it's happening. The rapture is coming. And like, and then it wouldn't. And the car would just pass our house. And that whole like magic fades away in an instant, right?
Mhm. Did you
I
read the Left Behind books?
I did. I
Okay,
did. The
same.
children's version or the teens
Oh yeah,
version
the
and
teens
the
version, of course.
yes. So the older I got though, the less kind that felt, right? I started viewing myself as more apart from the rest of humanity. I had a relationship to the divine in a way that others did not. I felt there was more purpose in the way I was living life than others did. I don't know, a little intoxicating, right? There's a specialness to it that was kind of intoxicating. And it's telling that at the end of that sequence, which I really love, is set to the song. I don't remember the actual name, but like "I Wish We'd All Been Ready." The lyrics are like two men walking up a hill. One disappears and one's left standing still. The more I started to sit with that, started to feel just kind of antisocial and rough. Like it led to me not feeling particularly connected to people and feeling kind of isolated. And so it's I love the imagery of that woman just standing on the roof in the rain, feeling both pious and let down and
Mm.
wondering like, what exactly am I doing here?
Well, I
Because
love that in season 3, we're driving toward the 7th anniversary of the departure, and pastors have ascribed a meaning to the 7th year. And we're driving toward this date with this expectation that this date is going to include some huge event.
yeah,
And we are scared. We're anticipatory. It's like we've been given this puzzle that we don't know how to solve. Everybody thinks they have the piece that's going to solve it. And then the day comes and nothing happens. It's
yeah,
just a day like any other. And you see Kevin Sr. and Jr. sitting on a roof like that woman,
yeah,
sitting there looking out at the landscape around them, and a day that has dawned and nothing has changed.
yeah.
It's
And
frustrating.
I love that phrasing though. It's just a day like any other. I do think that having that attachment to being part of that apocalypse, of being blinked out of existence on this earth, isn't that different from heaven's version of suicidal ideation. I think there is an intolerance for a day like any other, right?
Mm.
This notion of like, I so badly don't want to be here in this version of life that I cannot tolerate a day like any other. And that is, to me, the devastating heart of this show. It has its eyes set on religious ideology, mystical ideology, and hyper rationalism. And the ways in which anyone caught in any one of those camps all struggle from the same challenge, right? They're distracting themselves from just being present and struggling toward some sense of purpose, which we all have a hard time with for some reason or another. And I don't know, learning to climb down from the roof and do life is, to me, the whole thrust of this show. I tend to think that the series finale is perfect because it comes back to the most affected character in the series. No one has lost more than Nora Durst, and she has constantly been wrestling with a very literal answer to the question, where did my family go? And when you know you're not going to get answers, that that stays with you. I've lost a friend who has gone missing and we have no sense of what happened to him. And I will always have the sense of unresolved grief and questions that will always gnaw at me. And many of us have versions of that that aren't quite so dramatic, but we wrestle with that, right? So she has gone through all of these just different phases of grief, but she's still left with this uncertainty. Throughout season 3, there seems to be an offer of certainty. This kind of shadowy underground organization reaches out and says, hey, we have a technology that is going to let you go to the universe where the 2% disappeared. They offer some scientific explanation. I won't bother with that. But we have a technology that will
They
allow
don't
you,
bother with that either.
right, that will allow you to reunite with your family. And she ultimately reaches a point where it seems like she is going to avail herself of this technology. From an outside viewer, it kind of looks like this is going to kill you. Anyway, she decides to do it, and then we pivot to some either alternate dimension. Years later, we're not sure. Something is very different about this world that we are living in. Nora encounters Kevin Jr. again, and it seems like she does not remember him, but he remembers her. And they go through this dance of kind of trying to reacquaint, start over again. She's skeptical, he's earnest, and ultimately I think she admits that she does know who he is. She's just trying to kind of forget and distance herself. And she basically says, the technology worked. I went to the universe where the other 2% vaporized to whatever, and I saw to them 98% of the world disappeared. It's far more devastating. And my family was the lucky ones. They only lost one person. That was me. And I found them and I observed them from a distance and saw that they had found a way to move on. So I came back here and I learned to live with my grief. It is unclear whether she is offering herself a false sense of certainty, like every other character seems to have done to some extent, or if she really did this and made a hard choice. Either way, she comes across as either a martyr to her own grief, or she is perhaps too weak to embrace the truth and therefore has to create a myth that gives her a sense of stability, like every other character's been doing over the course of this show. I loved it. I thought that was beautiful. I thought that was just a very touching way to let us still embrace ambiguity, because that's what this entire series is about, while also holding it very gently for such a brutal series. So I don't know. How did you feel it?
So Kevin and Nora are this couple that I was rooting for from season 1. I really loved their chemistry. I really wanted them to be together. And we follow them through season 2, trying to make this family work. Both of them are scared. Both of them are struggling, but they're trying to come back to each other. Season 3, Nora hears that there's this invention that might be able to take her to go see her family, and she can't let it go. And it begins to drive this wedge between her and Kevin. He is holding on as tightly as he can for somebody who is a comitophobe. And he follows her to Australia and he wants to enter into this journey with her, but she's holding him at arm's length. And she goes through this whole process of meeting with the scientists, and she thinks, I'm a shoo-in for this experiment, and they deny her. And she has this moment of mania that kind of comes out of this being rejected from this thing she was claiming she didn't want anyway. And this drives her into this fight with Kevin that essentially leads to their breakup. And that fight in a hotel room where the room catches on fire is completely and utterly devastating to me. I reacted very strongly to that breakup and the thought of this core of the show going away. And then we get this last episode where we pivot back to Nora and we see her journey. She's without Kevin. She is about to enter this chamber and choose what we think might be death. And she goes to take this breath, and I am on pins and needles. And they cut away and they show her riding her bike. She looks aged, and I lost it. I started sobbing. I had to pause. I don't know why it hit me that hard, but it was this idea of like, we've been here with this woman through this whole thing, and you are going to tell me that everything's okay. Like, I was so upset and so, like, scared that they were going to dump us in an alternate reality without Kevin. And I could barely focus on what came next because I was so scared they were going to disappoint me.
Yeah.
And then when Kevin shows up at her door looking like the most beautifully aged man I've ever seen, and he claims that they never had a relationship, that he just remembered her from long ago. He thought he saw her, and he invites her to this wedding and they have this date. And this whole episode unravels with us not knowing, are we in an alternate dimension? Did Nora die? Like, where is this happening? What is happening? We can tell that Nora remembers, and we don't know whether or not Kevin remembers. It actually, to some regard, is almost more painful that one remembers and the other doesn't. And then to get to the end of the episode and realize that we are on Earth, we are in the reality that they were in before everything happened, but things are quote unquote normal now. And they have this chance to be together if they are able to believe this common myth that she lays out. It's beautiful. I should have trusted them with the landing. I didn't trust them throughout most of the episode. And then when it ended, I was like, oh, I need to rewatch this without anger because it was absolutely stunning. And as you said, completely landed the plane in the best way possible.
So what I really love about Parada's vision, he wanted to dig into the grief that follows something like a gentle apocalypse. 2% of the world's population. In theory, that's almost manageable. That's such a dark thing to say, but that can feel manageable.
I mean, Thanos snapped half of existence.
That's right.
And we're just talking about 2%.
Exactly. Yeah. So some of that was just inspired by his sense of grief after losing friends who have moved away. That oftentimes feels world-shattering to some extent because something important to you is lost and it gets to the core of your being in a way that you kind of wish it wouldn't because, I don't know, you want to feel in control. You want to feel like you are the master of your fate. And you want to preserve the things that matter to you, and you can't. That's not a guarantee in life. You can nurture them, you can protect them to the degree that you want, but ultimately you cannot control whether that stays in your world, and that's devastating to deal with. And I think you're right. I think the show tended to the core attachment that we have watched mature over the course of the entire series to the point where, yeah, they lose each other and they come back and have to just struggle at each other, attempting to be gentle and attempting to be nurturing where that had failed in the past and deal with the people that they've been and the people they are now. Kevin still tries to opt out by pretending to be an amnesiac. Nora is still trying to seek the myth of clarity while also learning to grapple with grief more productively. I don't know. Like, again, showing modest growth is more meaningful than a happy ever after, but by all stretch of the imagination. And I didn't find it bleak. I found it very hopeful.
Well, and this part of the reason why I'm obsessed with the idea that Lindelof started season 3, driving towards something big is going to happen. And what do you do the next day? And the next month and the next year. And part of what was so devastating or so crushing to me about snapping from that chamber where Nora was on this precipice of big change to this quiet moment of her years later. We were driving towards something huge. We had all the emotions, all the fears, all the anxieties driving toward this big moment. And then it was a day like any other, and life kind of went back to normal. How do we live? How do we live after a big event? How do we go back to normal?
Okay, so getting to the core question, who was this for? I'll start first. Was it for you?
Yeah.
Excellent. Who do you think it was for, generally speaking? If it declined in audience over the course of 3 years precipitously, who was it really for?
Yeah. I have this theory that when you come to a show after it has concluded and the dust has settled, that you can approach a TV show as a completed package. So I have this benefit a decade later of coming to a show knowing what it was, right? I have cultural myth around the show. I have video essays I can find on YouTube. It is a completed package that's been handed to me, and I'm not critiquing it as it's going along. So when the show was being created over a decade ago, I don't know if it would have been for me, not just because of where I was in my life or where my comfort level with some of the graphic elements of the show. I don't know if it would have been for me while it was being created, because I would have felt like I had a responsibility to impact where it was going. Now that it's being handed to me as a completed package, I can say with full certainty that it is for me, because it is this
Yeah.
piece, this reflection on grief that, as you know, is one of the themes that really strikes me the most of anything that I like to think about.
Yeah. I agree. If I had to posit an oversimplified answer, I do think that the show is probably for anyone who has already gone through some version of a dark night of the soul, because this show takes you to the full depths that someone who has undergone that journey has probably felt, and does not offer easy ways out. Like, it is not going to offer unearned hope. And to me, I find that very gratifying, because the notion of false hope is more painful than, yeah, more painful than the alternative. Otherwise, this could actually be a somewhat terrifying viewing experience. It is going to call some things that you hold deeply to or dear into the light in a way that might be very uncomfortable. And that's not just religion, right? That is absurdism, that is rationality, that is psychotherapy, that is all of the above. No one is safe from cushioning themselves from harsh realities. So I do think that's partly why we decline in audience over time, because if I'm not ready for that, I'm not going to stick around. So, and this will be my last question then. Who would you recommend this to in your world?
That is hard. It's a tough show to recommend because it does deal with such heavy themes. And really, I have this circle of friends who hold their faith in such a way that they don't lose their faith when questions are being asked. Those are the type of people I would recommend this to. If you are someone who holds your faith in such a way that even the act of asking questions is undermining your faith, this is not for you. And I've learned over the years that I am drawn to shows that want to walk through grief and, like you said, not offer a false sense of hope that you're not just going to magically get better one day.
Absolutely. I'm similar. I'm pretty broad, and in letting people know that this is one of my favorite shows of all time. And I'll caveat, it's difficult, it's tough, it's hard to sit with. But if I am offering it up as a curated recommendation, it's almost always for somebody who has undergone some form of significant transformation in their world, either transforming grief, right? Or someone who's gone through a change of faith in some way. I don't know that you have to watch a show like this and necessarily hold on to your faith in the same way that you had it. It does ask you to maybe give up something or change something.
Yeah, it's
And I think
challenging.
that's challenging. Or somebody who's even undergone a political change, something that represents a phase shift in life. Usually, I would imagine that person would have a more positive experience, or at least feel a little bit seen watching this show.
It's so true. I will say, I will recommend for anybody who does watch the show and wants to learn a little bit more. There is a YouTuber who has very few videos on his channel,
Yeah.
but he reflects upon the philosophy of Kevin Garvey specifically. And the
Mm.
YouTuber's name is Kirby Yardley. And I devoured the videos he did on Kevin's character. And um, He goes into the myths that are being alluded to or paying homage to. So he does a great job. And I would highly recommend those videos.
Amazing. Okay, so to not leave on too bleak a note, was there anything that you used as a palate cleanser when watching these episodes? Anything to emerge from the darkness?
I, I binged Never Have I Ever. Oh, this like delightfully quirky show on Netflix about high school students and particularly actually a central character walking through grief once again. Do you remember what you did in response to this show?
I unfortunately, I think, went for a full dose of depression and went for BoJack Horseman at the same time.
Double down.
Right, I was clearly going through something. What I will end up doing though, whenever I go down these dark rabbit holes, is almost always watch like Parks and Recreation as my palate cleanser, just to remember that there is
There is
beauty.
hope.
There is beauty and hope and levity. Thank you, Michael Schur.